External thread cutting, operation. This module will explain the details of cutting external threads on the lathe. It presupposes that the preceding modules on thread cutting, 7.3.N1 and 7.3.N2, have been viewed. When proficiency has been acquired in setting up the lathe to cut any given amount of threads per inch, you are ready to cut a thread to the proper depth. Back the cross slide away from the workpiece. Return the carriage to its starting point at the end of the workpiece. Turn the cross slide handle clockwise to bring it to 0 on the micrometer collar. Turn the compound slide in approximately 20/1000ths of an inch. Note, the Morisiki compound is calibrated in half thousandths, so the micrometer collar will be set at 40/1000ths. Position the coolant nozzle over the workpiece and adjust it to a steady flow. Make a cut using the same procedures you used when making the trial cut in the lathe setup exercise. There are several points to remember when cutting threads. When all the steps are followed correctly, the end product will be a properly cut thread. 1 point. Always close the half nut at the right point on the thread chasing dial. Always turn the cross slide out at the end of a run. If you turn it in, you can really blow it and ruin the workpiece. Do not open the half nut and forget to turn the cross slide out. The result would be a groove cut around the workpiece at the end of the threaded section. You can only do this if there is an undercut at the end of the threads. Return the carriage to the starting position again. Before making the next pass, adjust the compound in another 10 to 15 thousandths and return the cross slide to 0. You can avoid most pitfalls by not trying to hurry. Remember, speed is the result of efficiency. Each time you make a cut, check before starting the next cut. You may have to make about 10 cuts before you have a finished thread. There are visual signs other than measuring to check the thread progress. Watch the crest of the threads. When you see them begin to narrow, you will know that you are on the home stretch. The final cut, or finish cut, should be made by turning the cross slide in 1 to 3 thousandths. This feeds the threading tool straight in, and both sides of the tool can make the finish cut. When the thread cut is finally complete, stop the lathe and check the thread for burrs. If you find them, file the tops of the threads lightly with a fine file. Now for a helpful trick of the trade. After filing, make another pass with the threading tool, but do not change any of the settings. Use the same depth settings as for the finish cut. Now for the moment of truth. You are going to check the threads. One method of checking threads is to use a pitch mic and check the pitch diameter of the thread. Compare the reading with a pitch diameter chart. Here's another simpler way to check threads. Take a nut of the proper size and thread and use it as a gauge. If it won't go on properly, take another light cut at the threads. Still another method to check threads is to use a screw thread gauge. This is usually used when greater accuracy is needed. The 3-wire method is recommended by the Bureau of Standards as an extremely accurate way to measure threads. This method may be the only way to check threads that are not standard, or where any of the previously mentioned methods cannot be used. 3 wires of a known and equal diameter are placed, 2 on one side and 1 on the other, in the thread grooves. A micrometer is then used to measure the diameter over the wires. For this example, 3 number 55 drill blanks were used. The following formula is then used to calculate the measurement required. The calculations shown are for the example turned in the preceding exercise. Because you have to make so many passes to cut threads, it is not uncommon for the threading tool to get dull. When this happens, it has to be removed and sharpened, or another one put in its place. When the threading tool has been removed or replaced, it must be readjusted before making another pass or cut. With the lathe running, close the split nut. Be sure it's at the right dial position. Let the carriage move just a short distance, then disengage the clutch. Leave the split nut lever engaged to prevent changing the carriage position. Move first the cross slide, then the compound slide. Do this until the tool point matches the partially cut threads. Reset the micrometer colors on both the cross slide and compound to 0. Then proceed with the thread cutting sequences already explained. The preceding instructions refer to 60-degree right-hand external threads, but the basic procedures are the same for cutting Acme threads, square threads, threading a tapered workpiece, and metric threads, which many lathes are capable of cutting. The only changes necessary to cut a left-hand thread is to change the position of the compound rest and change the direction of carriage travel. Internal threading, which is basically a combination boring-threading operation, will be covered in another module.